From the past to the present day, this body of writing displays a unity in its main features that sets it apart from the literatures of the rest of the world. The languages may be varied due to geographical distances, but they share a common sense of identity bound by a common sense of ancestry. Some of the European languages include Greek, Latin, Germanic, Baltic, Slavic, Celtic, and Romance languages are all members of the Indo-European family. Finnish, Hungarian, and Semitic languages of the Eastern Mediterranean, such as Hebrew, are not Indo-European. The division of the European literature includes ancient literature, medieval literature, and Renaissance literature. Under the ancient literature covers the 5 ancient civilizations of Babylonia, Assyria, Egypt, Greece, and Rome, including the culture of the Israelites in Palestine. The use of clay tablets, papyrus paper scrolls is what they use, and they are ways for writing of the Holy Scriptures, which is very influential in European literature. Songs, poems, fables, parables were also invented during this period. The Holy Bible by the Sacred Scriptures of Jews and Iliad and Odyssey by the Epics of Greece are under the influential works of the ancient literature. The fall of the Roman Empire marks the beginning of the medieval or the Middle Ages, also known the Dark Ages. During this century, wars, famine, plagues, etc., barbarian invasions, and Muslim conquests marked this century. They used vellum or goatskin paper and parchment or sheepskin paper, and lastly, wooden tablets covered in green and black wax to fashion books which are more durable than scrolls became widespread. Beowulf by Anglo-Saxon tradition and King Arthur by Geoffrey of Monmouth are some of the popular books during this period. The term Renaissance is rebirth or revival. It is also given to the historical period in Europe that succeeded the Middle Ages. This period marked the reawakening of a new birth of ancient Greece and Rome. During this century, scholars searched for lost ancient texts whose dissemination was much helped by developments in printing in Europe from about 1450. Written short stories, novella, and tales are born in this period. Some of the influential persons during this period were Christopher Columbus, who discovered the New World or the Americas, and Christopher Marlowe, who wrote Dr. Faustus.
So we have the 17th century literature. This is the period of unceasing disturbance and violent storms, no less in literature than in politics and society. The great question of the century, which confronted serious writers from John Donne and John Dryden, was Michel de Montaigne. This period is also known as Age of Reason. Some European masterpieces were written during this period, like Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes and the tragedies by William Shakespeare. While here in the 18th century literature, the 18th century was marked by 2 main impulses, reason and passion. The respect paid to reason was shown in pursuit of order, symmetry, decorum, and scientific knowledge. The cultivation of the feelings stimulated philanthropy, exaltation of personal relationships, religious fervor, and the cult of sentiment or sensibility. In this literature, the rational impulse fostered satire, argument, wit, plain prose. The other inspired the psychological novel and the poetry of the sublime. Novel and satire were born in this period. World-class masterpieces were written during this period. For example, a Dictionary of the English Language by Samuel Johnson, an elegy written in a country churchyard by Thomas Gray. For the 19th century literature, the 19th century was one of the most vital and interesting periods of all. This period has special interest as the formative era from which many modern literary conditions and tendencies derive. It influences that they had their origins or were in development in this period: Romanticism, Symbolism, and Realism. These literary movements are reflected in the current of modern literature, and many social and economic characteristics of the 20th century were determined in the 19th. The literary giants who stood out during this period are Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth and A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And lastly, in 20th century literature, it features an interest in the unconscious and the irrational was reflected in their work and that of others of about this time. In the 1930s, these qualities of the 20th century thought were not abandoned but rather were expanded into a political context. This period marked an increasing sense of crisis and urgency. Doubts as to the 19th century's fate in the psychological stability